My tax pro kind of sucks. I'm super stressed about my taxes. I just don't really like my tax professional. In this video, I'm going over 5 tips for how to make your taxes less stressful. I get a lot of questions from people about looking for a new tax professional. They've been changing year to year because they just can't find the right person. They just don't really like going. They kind of dread the whole process. And in this video, I want to talk about this because that stress can really weigh on you all year long. I hope this video will help you so that you can approach your taxes with a different perspective. Amanda here, you're watching The Business Finance Coach, where I simplify business and these technicalities like taxes to help you succeed, because I truly believe that the world needs what you have to offer and what you're passionate about. I give away a free business spreadsheet template to help you keep track of your accounting, calculate quarterly taxes, and end-of-year taxes. So if that's something you're interested in, check out the description below. And if you're new here, consider subscribing while still watching this video in the bottom right corner. Now back to the 5 tips for how to make your taxes less stressful. If your tax preparer actually did make a mistake that cost you money, do check out another video, which I'll have linked here or in the description below, to report a mistake that your tax professional made. And there are specific qualifications. I go over those in that video. But in this video, we want to talk about all the situations that don't apply to that technical mistake category, but you still find yourself dreading the whole process, stressing about it, and that sort of thing. Really, all this comes down to is people have the wrong expectation about how taxes work and what the options are. So if we can shift your expectations going forward, you can really let that stress go, because there's no point. It's a waste of time, right? And it can really hold you back. I see taxes hold people back in business all the time. They're trying to hide their business under the table. And what does that say about money if you don't feel like you can make enough of it to even pay the taxes and contribute to the society? On that note, I will say I do think our taxes are way too high on the middle and lower class, and that should change, and that's something I'm fighting for. And so when you subscribe to my channel, watch my videos, you're supporting that as well. So tip number 1 is understanding your options when you're hiring a tax professional. So a lot of times people don't understand that if a tax professional is charging $100 to $300, that's a really low rate. That person is probably a seasonal employee or working for themselves, and they have a lot of costs associated with that, to e-file your return, to spend time talking to you. And so oftentimes they're not actually experts in everything having to do with taxes. They may know a lot, but they're not an expert, because what their specialty is in doing the taxes in the software. Just like a bookkeeper versus an accountant, a bookkeeper specializes in using the software. And it's the same thing for most tax filers who are just doing individual returns. Their expertise is the software, not the rules. Now, that being said, they can be very knowledgeable, but remember, their specialty isn't to explain the tax code. That gets into education and what I'm doing on my channel, and it's a totally different skill set and expertise. And many tax preparers just don't have the years of experience around tax code to have the right answer to every question off the top of their head. With that being said, a lot of times people are frustrated when they email their tax pro throughout the year and ask a question. You know, if you're paying a lot more than that, now we're into a different sector. But I know a lot of people don't want to pay more than a few $100s. And so when you email outside of the season, that person could be getting tons of emails outside of the season, and they aren't prepared for how to answer those questions. And, you know, they're essentially not being paid for that other than to keep you as a client. but they may be working other jobs, right? This is just seasonal employment. So understanding all of this can really help. Now, the other tip I would give you is that when you find a professional that you really like, once you understand all the tips we're covering in this video, you may approach them differently. You know, if you want to talk to them in off-season about planning, there are 2 things you want them to know. Number 1, I understand if you don't have the answer off the top of your head. I understand. Most people don't understand. Most people want the answer, and they're going to get mad if the person doesn't seem to be able to answer them immediately. So letting the person know, hey, you don't have to answer me on the spot. I understand that you don't know all these rules off the top of your head. And number 2, offer to pay them to meet with you. Most preparers in this type of scenario may not even be comfortable charging more than $25 or $50 for an hour to meet with you. And I imagine it's probably well worth your time to spend that type of money on having a meeting with your tax professional. Maybe offer to take them out to lunch or buy them a coffee and also pay them. They're gonna feel respected and like you understand the challenging role they have as a tax preparer. One last thing on tax preparer tips. You can go to a place like H&R Block and those types of franchises. Generally, I recommend staying away from them. However, you can find great people at those organizations as well. But if you find someone who's online, who's experienced with whatever type of job or other situations you have going on in your life, a business, etc., you could find someone who's really experienced in your area, and that can be a great thing. With someone online, it can be hard because you can't meet up with them. I do think a local person that you form a relationship with is the best scenario for most people, because there are a lot of dedicated people who are doing taxes each year in their community with a big network, and those are the people that I typically see people most happiest with doing their taxes. So I would keep an eye out for that, ask people for referrals. And then one other option, if you're in a bind, is to use TurboTax now has a Live Tax Pro edition, and I have an affiliate link below in the description. Tip number 2 is that taxes are super complicated. I kind of touched on this in the last tip number 1 about professionals and them not necessarily knowing every rule off the top of their head. But one thing to keep in mind is that taxes are probably way more complicated than people even think. There is not a database somewhere of the instructions for every situation. Instead, what you're really paying for with an experienced tax professional who's going to charge a few $100s per hour is you're paying for their expertise, their understanding of the entire system and laws. Because with taxes, we have Congress creating the law, we have the IRS trying to interpret it, creating instructions, and then we have, when the IRS audits people to enforce these rules, then we have the legal system, judges making determinations in tax court. And all 3 of these things are things that can be used, and there's many other types of publications coming from these 3 avenues, and all 3 of these apply. So tax preparers have to be staying abreast of all 3 of these areas. And so it's just a huge amount of information. Tip number 3, something that makes taxes hugely stressful on top of the 2 things I just covered, is that we encourage tax avoidance in this country, which means no one wants to pay extra taxes. Everyone wants to get every penny they can write off. Now, a few things about this. If you're paying a tax professional like $200, $300 to do your taxes, and you're like, oh, I've got to get every single mile, every single write-off, $100 worth of write-offs times your effective rate, let's say 15%, that's all you're saving is $15. So it's not that it's not worth to get all of your write-offs together, but just keep in mind that if you're going back and forth a ton, that tax professional should raise what they're charging you. And so then you've got to decide, okay, is this really worth it? Now, I highly recommend tracking all of your write-offs throughout the year, and that's why I give away my free business spreadsheet template and training to help you get started on that and build that habit. And I have my paid program, Small Business School, which has my template library for everything you can imagine tracking. I have links for all this in the description below, but saving money on taxes comes down to keeping track of things. At the end of the year, if you're trying to go back and figure it all, every little detail out, I would say it's not worth it. Stay focused on going forward. Accounting records are actually required to be maintained regularly. So when you're getting caught up, if you haven't kept track of your information, you want to do it as quickly and efficiently as possible, and then focus on keeping track as you go in the future. That's going to put you in the best place for taxes and your finances in general. It's always baffled me that people are trying to avoid every penny for taxes when taxes are what pay for our military. Big majority of your taxes are paying for the military, and they pay for our roads, our infrastructure, everything related to our society, our civilized society. And so when people really start down this path of avoidance, that can turn into illegal criminal activity when you're evading taxes. And so you want to be really careful with that line and remember what your taxes are going to. Now, like I said before, I understand they're too high, and so I understand why people are so cognitive of this. But when it comes to that stress level and putting our taxes in perspective and not wasting our energy on them, this is something worth noting and reminding you about. Tip number 4 is DIY tax software. Now, of course, you can use DIY tax software to do your taxes yourself. There's Free Tax USA, and I have a video linked below about how to file your taxes, including business taxes, in Free Tax USA for free. They charge a small fee for state, but it's actually free. You may have seen TurboTax advertised free, but then you get in there and they're charging about $100 depending on what time it is before taxes. So Free Tax USA is a great alternative. But when it comes to doing your taxes for free, even if you hire a tax professional, you can still update one of these softwares because you don't pay until you actually file. And so you can use these DIY tax softwares to compare, to check to what the tax professional is filing for you, and just to learn and understand your taxes. So when you go through these softwares, you're asked questions, and as you answer each question, there's always little links to learn more about the situation and to help you understand how to answer the question. Tip number 5, buy insurance. So you can always select an insurance option, typically whether you hire someone or you use DIY tax software. And if you select that insurance option, it will help you in the event that there's a mistake. So to review our 5 tips here, professionals not necessarily making as much money as you think, and 2 tips for dealing with them and getting them to help you were to offer to pay them if you're asking them to answer questions outside of tax season. And so you can also let them know you understand they may not have the answers for you off the top of their head. The second tip is that taxes are super complicated and nuanced. Understanding that there's so many areas tax professionals have to keep track of to even know what the current status is about every little aspect of tax law. Number 3, we really encourage avoidance, but our taxes are going to good things, our civilized society. And so if you haven't kept track throughout the year, get caught up as quickly as possible. Don't spend so much time on every little dollar because it's just probably not worth your time. And instead, focus on tracking your finances going forward. Tip number 4 was using DIY tax software to do your taxes yourself, or even just to learn about your taxes and compare them to what a tax pro is filing for you. And tip number 5 was using insurance for your taxes, which you can get whether you DIY or hire a pro. Well, that's all for the 5 tips to make your taxes less stressful. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to you deciding Is this worth me spending this much time and stress and energy on this, or should I just accept it and move on and let myself be less stressed out? You get to decide, do I want to learn about my taxes or do I not want to learn about my taxes? I'm just going to focus on fostering that relationship with a pro and move on. I know a lot of people on my channel probably are going to want to learn about their taxes and hire a pro, and so that's why I included these tips in this video. But at the end of the day, you don't want to waste time and energy being stressed out about your taxes. And obviously, you can learn a lot about these technicalities on my channel. And I'll have some other videos posted around me here that you can check out as well. So again, if you're new here, consider subscribing, liking this video, sharing, or commenting in the description below. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next time. Bye.